see if this is going to cooperate. As soon as you open John's Gospel, you are aware that you are breathing a different air from that which you encountered in Matthew and Mark and Luke. It has often been described as a magic pool in which an elephant could swim and a baby could paddle. My sense of it is that it is a journey into the mystery of who Jesus is, inviting us ever deeper as the story unfolds, as an aspect of Jesus' identity that the reader might find helpful when they're reviewing the gospel, is thinking of him as a being who performs on two stages. The heavenly stage up there, which he leaves for a while to walk on the earthly stage down here. And he returns to the heavenly stage, and taking with him all those who belong up there. The reader will do well to remember that this is a very rich gospel whose meaning emerges slowly over a lifetime of reading. That was a quote from the gospel by Reverend Nicholas out of the UK, who did a direct translation from the scriptures. And that was his commentary at the beginning of the Gospel of John. The first chapter of John's Gospel connects Christ with creation in a most spectacular way. John informs us that all of creation, including the planet Earth, is a result of the impulse from the Word from God. That Word is here identified with God. That Word which precedes creation is the impulse to create everything, whether it be the physical or the unseen worlds. It is sobering to think about that in today's world, many sects of contemporary Christianity makes peace with environmental degradation, even as it claims the gift of God's special revelation in goodness in Christ and creation. I think that many of us, upon hearing this prologue to John's Gospel, that the light of the world came into the world, but the world did not know him and did not accept him, may take comfort in a kind of ironic hindsight, While the world of Jesus' time rejected him, surely those of us who have inherited 2,000 years of church's proclamation that Jesus is Lord would not make such a mistake. But if we Christians do not look upon creation and see, first and foremost, the divine intention that such creations bear, enduring testimony to God's goodness, then we are not even more worthy of blame than those who rejected God's testimony in the first place. The more we proclaim and claim the worship of the Creator God and incarnate Word, and yet treat the material environment as something less than God's good creation, through which God intended to be honored, the more hollow our testimonies become. Now, there has been among Christians some ambivalence concerning the goodness of creation. There has been a pattern of viewing creation as something less than good, as something less than the non-material, the heavenly realm, the spiritualized heavens. Such a favoring of non-material heaven over created earth informed an eschatology of escapism. It formed an end-of-times belief that we are going to heaven and not staying here, so we don't have to be concerned about here. Mm-hmm. This may be translated into some contemporary theologies you might have heard around, such as only visiting this planet, or this world is not my home. This idea that we belong to heaven and not of this earth allows Christians to toss care and love of the earth aside. As scholars such as Barbara Rossing or N.T. Wright or Norman Hamlin insisted, this escapist tradition which arguably remains the single most dominant end of times mindset, presents among Christians of all denominations. And no matter how liberal or conservative, it completely misrepresents the biblical witness. Beginning with Genesis and culminating in the book of Revelation, where the author bears witness of God's renewal of the face of the earth. Fidelity to the scripture is a hallmark of much theology and preaching, requires that we be no less celebratory of creation and no less vigilant against that which would degrade creation than are the Bible's own texts. We need to recognize as central, the affirmation of creation's goodness. The popular belief among Christians that the point of earthly life is to make it to a non-material heaven, at which point the earth can be dispensed with, should make one thing clear. The fight to honor creation as part of our Christian faith in our time is, among other things, part of the church's ongoing fight against the concept that creation is lesser in our culture and in our church. The church fathers thought that fight was worth winning for the sake of God's church. Similarly, we feel that the fight is worth winning for the sake of God's world. The theologian Stanley Shore-Goss pointed out the importance of preaching as if we had enemies. While many of us might wish to think of the default setting of Christian rhetoric being peacefulness, Shore-Goss's point is that bad theology has real consequences for the church and by extension for the world. We see that in the ways in which escapist Christian theologies have aided and abetted Christian apathy towards environmental abuse. Today, we celebrate the Word that precedes creation as it is identified as the second person of the Trinity. In Genesis 1, life emerges from earth on day 3. In John, one life, in all its dimensions, is located in the Word, that creative impulse of God that initiates creation. In a special way, this Word that brings light into the world recalls the mystery of day 1. And the earth was invisible and unformed, and darkness was upon the abyss, and the Spirit of God was rushing upon the water. And God said, "Let there be light." And the light came to be, and God saw the light, and that it was good. And God divided between light and the darkness, and called the light day, and the darkness was called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, day 1. Actually, thinking of it, what does God say in Genesis about creation? God saw the light, and it was good. And God called the firmament of heaven, and God saw that it was good. And God called the dry land earth, and the system of waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And the earth brought forth herbage and grass, and sowing according to its own kind, and according to its likeness, a fruit-bearing tree which yields fruit, whose seeds is in its according to its own kind on earth, and God saw that it was good. And as Genesis speaks of the sun and the moon to rule over day and night, and to divide the light and the darkness, and God saw it was good. And here's something we don't pay attention to, at least not much. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth creepy crawlies that have living souls." And God saw it was good. And God made the wild beasts of the earth, according to their kind, quadrupeds and creepy crawlies again. And the wild beasts of the earth according to their kind, and God saw that they were good. Then God saw everything. God saw everything as a whole. God saw everything that he made, and look, it was very good. And all this came into being through the Word, and apart from the Word, nothing came into being. John 1:3. By this evidence, by the own testimony of our sacred scriptures, the earth can be seen as nothing less than sacred. Holy ground, holy sky, holy creatures, holy waters, all created good. The Word which was, is, and will always be Christ. They were created through. We have at times lost our way. We have forgotten how to care for the land and the air, that we may live in harmony with it. We instead have tried to control and manipulate it so that we can benefit from it with no consequence. And yet, we are learning there are always consequences to what we do. One fine example is right here in the Bay Area. Now, I'm going to tell you over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to find different examples from an area, because like I said, we only know where we are, where we live, where we walk. So let's pay attention to right here. From the gold rush until the 1970s, San Francisco Bay shrunk by about 1/3. That was due to diking and dredging and filling to build highways and airports and farms and neighborhoods. And although modern environmental laws have stopped that practice, scientists, government leaders, and local officials have been on a very slow campaign to enlarge the bay and bring back its fish, its wildlife, and public access that has been lost over the past 2 decades. That has been lost, and they've been working on it for the past 2 decades. A mission that also helps to include restoring the wetlands to help protect Bay Area communities from sea level rise as the climate continues to warm. See, wetlands are important features in the landscape that provide numerous beneficial services for people and for fish and wildlife. We often forget that we benefit from caring for the earth. Some of these services or functions include protecting and improving water quality, providing fish and wildlife habitats, storing floodwaters, and maintaining surface water flow during dry periods. The valuable functions are a result of unique natural characteristics of wetlands. The combination of shallow water and high levels of nutrients and our primary productivity is ideal for the development of organisms that form the base of the food web. And they feed fish and amphibians and shellfish and insects, and many species of birds and mammals rely on the wetlands for food, water, and shelter, and especially during migration and breeding times. The microbes and the plants and the wildlife are part of a global cycles for water, nitrogen, and sulfur. Scientists know now that atmospheric maintenance may be an additional wetland function. You see, the wetlands store carbon within their plants, communities, and soil instead of releasing it into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Thus, the wetlands help to moderate global climate conditions. Just this past Monday, Bob and I took a ride out to Point Reyes. We passed salt marsh and wetlands and natural wonders that are unique landscape of the Bay Area. Being good caretakers of the earth isn't just to preserve these natural habitats for their beauty, but also, in the long run, it protects the whole environment in which we live. As I said before, it's a little overwhelming to view the earth as a whole. We know what we experience. We know the land we walk on. We know the land we visit. We know the field we care for. So during this season of creation, I will make these things all relatable to us here. Now, as we live in this Bay Area. And that's why today I'm speaking of the wetlands. Many of the foods we enjoy come from the wetlands. Who hasn't enjoyed a good Peking duck? Where do you think the ducks come from? Most commercial and game fish are bred and raised their young in coastal marshes and estuaries. Manhattan flounder, sea trout, spout, croaker, striped bass are among more familiar fish that depend on coastal wetlands. Shrimp, oysters, clams, blue and Dutchess crabs likewise need the wetlands for food, shelter, and breeding grounds. Many of the foods we love come from the areas we are trying to restore, so we, as consumers, actually benefit from caring for the wetlands as well as all the earth. As I was thinking and looking for sources for inspiration, I came across a web page by there they go. Not quite on cue, guys. I wanted you a few minutes ago. A new youngin' there. And they're so tame around here that they hardly move if we happen to poke our heads up. They've learned to live with us. But our job is to protect their environment so they can continue to live with us. So I came across this webpage by an Irish monk. And I don't know if you've ever been to Ireland, but their care for the earth is very different from the way we function. But their section of earth is very different from our section of earth as well. But his rules, almost 3 pages worth, some of them were very specific that can be translated well to all of us. And this first one says, respect all as God's gift. The earth, all species, all people, all property. It's about respect. Reduce, reuse. Now this was repair and recycle. How often do we go, it's broken and toss it away when it only needs maybe a piece of glue or a wire tightened? I'll tell you a story that's not really related, but sort of is. There was a day I was in an antique shop in Martinez, and they had a lovely 1962 Wurlitzer jukebox. Now those things are collector's items, if you don't know. But it was marked down just to $850, and I asked the gentleman, I said, well, what's wrong with these? Oh, it just doesn't work, so you just need to get rid of it. And the components themselves were valuable if you took the thing apart. But I just decided to take an elbow to it, give it a good nudge in a certain spot, and it worked fine. I had it for many years. I moved it 3 times, and when I moved back to the LA area, I wasn't moving that thing one more time, so I went to a community center. But it held a good supply of 45s, and it played all your favorites. But all it took was a little repair, a little paying attention to what's right in front of us. Use recycled paper wherever possible, kitchen, toilet rolls, so on. Compost kitchen waste. We have a composter right by the gate there. I try to keep it moist. It doesn't have the most convenient lid in the garden. You have to kind of pop it off. It's a Tupperware thing. But it has accelerant in it, a little natural composting material, and so we try to use our coffee grounds and the papers and get them back into good soil to put back into the garden. We can make simple choices of using more environmentally friendly washing and cleaning material. The one I find hard, and everybody says it, there's commercials for it all the time, is don't leave electrical appliances on standby. Unplug them when you're not using them. Of course, then you have to wait 10 minutes when it fires up again. I'm going to try to do better at that. Of course, switch off lights. Change out your bulbs if you can to be more energy efficient. Use only as much water in the kettle that you need. Here's a little Great Britain influence. How often are we putting on a kettle? Use cooler washes, shorter cycles and fuller loads, and shop locally and buy local produce, organic if you can. That's one of the great things about living in this area. We do have a lot of locally grown and farmed, and it's easy. It's at our fingertips to support our farmers and to use fresh produce. Buy fair trade products. He put it in there, I didn't. And luckily, on November 10th, our fair trade and local artisan church boutique will be in the hall to remind us about people all around the world who earn their living by making crafts by hand. Grow your own vegetables if you can. And when buying electrical appliances, remember to use those that are more efficient if you can. Walk, cycle, or use public transportation whenever possible. Or use fuel-efficient automobiles, or drive slower, it saves gas. Donate old clothes and furniture and toys. I was looking at, been on food for so long, sorry. If you want to donate old food, the compost bin is right out there. Learn how environmental issues are linked to poverty. There's a lot written about that. And it is more easy to see in areas like Southern California, where you find oil drilling and fracking is in the midst of the poorest of our communities. Why? Because a person who has a mansion on a hill in Beverly Hills doesn't want it in their backyard, and they can afford to pay for the laws to happen to protect them, but not their neighbor. That's what we're called to do as Christians, is to remind them that this is about all of us, not just some of us. And that means to become active, politically, environmentally, be aware of where the needs are, and even in our own community. And then take a walk. Be blessed by the environment around you. Let the earth bless you as we learn to be a blessing to the earth. The climax of the reading from John 1 is amazing. It has this connection of Christ in verse 14. The eternal word that precedes creation becomes part of creation. This word that is very God who brought earth into being becomes flesh and blood and comes to the earth. This God that caused the earth to be born out of primal water is now born from waters of a woman. And he walks and lives and heals and teaches. And then he returns. So the earth story continues. God becomes part of the earth to redeem the creatures of the earth. They're really running. I wonder when Mom's going to stop and discover there's fresh blackberries right there. Yeah. There's not a better sermon than a couple of deer running around in the yard. I really cannot surpass God's own creation with the size. The dwelling of God in this piece of earth, who we know as Jesus is described using the language of God's glory, dwelling in the tabernacle in the wilderness. The glory or presence of God is now revealed to be present in a human being and part of the earth. I had avoided using the term global warming, and you know why? Because it doesn't matter. The simple, sacred story is the earth is sacred. And God sees it as good. And therefore we are called to care for it and care for it better than we have been. It's that simple. There's no need for a political argument about whether the earth is warming or not. It doesn't matter. It's not a matter of science. It's a matter of faith. Now may God bless you and each of us as we seek ways to be better stewards, to find better ways to care for this sacred space, this earth, this holy ground that is all around us, underneath us, allowing us to breathe and thrive every day. Amen.